Good morning, I'm Bob Adams and I'm here in England at the Festival of Quilts, and I've been doing a workshop for 3 days here. And one of the process that I've been using is discharging dye from cloth. And this is an example of some of the work I do. This is a breakdown piece where you start with a silk screen, and as it breaks down, different images begin to appear on your cloth. And this is a discharge method. Now there's many different ways that you can discharge from a cloth. One of them is to take like a sponge on a roller and apply it to the cloth. You can use a direct application of the chemicals. You can use a silk screen and apply it to the cloth. Another type of screen is a thermofax produced screen. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is apply the thiox solution, which is this, and it's mixed with a print paste. In this case, I put it in a jar which closes up tight, and you can use it for a day or so before it loses its power. But I've also put some in this container that I can go directly with my brush, pick it up, and then apply it to the cloth. Another way I can apply is simply squeeze it right out of a bottle. And this would be applied this way. Or I can use it in the screen. I can lay it on first in the screen. And then I can use the squeegee to pull the chemicals through the screen. So the first thing I'm going to do is to begin to develop an image. So I take my thiox, and I'm going to apply it to the cloth. Then I'm going to make my lines, begin to develop the shape that I'm going to be developing. The thicker I put it on in some areas, the more discharge I'm going to achieve. So I can start with a very heavy push, lighten up, and then different things will happen with the chemical applied. I can apply it, and the harder I apply it, the more dye that I'm going to take out of the cloth. Then I can begin to play with my different textures. I can stamp. Now I'm going to pull through the silk screen. So I'm going to layer my material at the top. Then I'm going to take my squeegee, and I'm going to keep it just almost vertical. And I'm going to pull the material slowly through the screen. And like any silk screening process, it'll take a couple pulls when you first start to get your image to appear. You lift it off. And then here's your lines left on the cloth. The beauty of this process is I can take this and rinse it out, or I can leave it alone and then develop it later. But before I take it to the final process, which is using a steam iron, because this is heat activated, I'll hang it to dry. And that can be done in the studio or it can be done outside. But it is advisable when you start to discharge. This is when the vapors in the chemical reacts. Anytime you're working with chemicals, it is very important to have gloves on and wear a respirator. And the respirator, it's important to have a respirator that is not for dust, not for sawdust. This one is made for vapors, and that's very important. So you should always have it on. It should fit snugly so the vapors can't get to you. If you can smell it, it's not on tight enough. All right, now I've prepared myself for the final step, which is a discharge with using heat, and in this case, it's a steam iron. All right, yesterday I prepared this cloth so that it would be dried and we wouldn't have to wait. It's easier on the iron, and it's much simpler. It doesn't destroy the image if you're smushing around with the iron into the chemical. So now it's dried, all I have to do is apply the heat. The application of the heat makes the chemicals respond. That's why I have my mask ready to put on. I'll put my mask on, and then I'll use the iron. Okay, now as I use the iron, where I apply the heat for the longest, that's where the chemical is really working on the material, and you can see how light it is. Also then I can vary how dark and how light I want it. Here I didn't take it on, keep the iron on as long. This is more of a gray or a subdued value. Therefore, the manipulation comes from how long and how close I stay in an area to how much I want to release. And that's the way you can vary and make interesting things happen to your images. The thing that fascinates me most about this technique, I can layer textures and already established values before I even begin to apply paint. And sometimes the beauty of this process is it's a finished product in itself, but there are many more things that you can do to it if you want to make adjustments to the piece. This is another approach to what we've just witnessed. This one is a stitch resist. The material is folded, and I took thread with the sewing machine, stitched on a design onto the top of the cloth. It's been folded about 6 times here. All right, after you've stitched it and it's folded together, then you heat the thiox, you pour it into a pan, and then you set this in it and immerse it in the liquid. The liquid is about 180 degrees, here again with thiox and soda ash mixed together. And when you begin to see the chemical reaction taking place, then it's a judgment call. Is it where you want it? Is it too little, too much? Then you remove it from the solution and put it into cold water. That stops the reaction. And then you take the piece apart, and here you have layers that are light, which are the top layers, medium layers as you go down in your folds, to the darkest ones, which are the deepest in your folding. This is an example of my discharge process. The whole background now, this piece started out as black. Now I've discharged it to different values. And this piece in particular is like a series that I'm pursuing now. I'm using thread as the only color. The thread that I'm using is a polyester neon thread. And this is what gives me my color in all the shapes, so that there is an absence of dye, but the color is thread entirely on the piece. As a teacher, I'd go home at night and I didn't feel like doing my work. So what I would do is get up early in the morning, and this is what I began to be very concerned with, is what was going on with the moon in the nighttime. This is a very subtle discharge piece because the moon, and this is a blue moon. A blue moon is the second full moon of the month. All right, and then the night sky is much softer than what happens during the daylight hours. So I subtly discharge the background colors, and this is how this piece evolved. All right, now this is another discharge piece. I've kept it to similar to values, black, white, and gray. Here again, thread is the only element of color or value that I've been using besides what is discharged in the background. I've stayed to the black and white tones. This was a piece that went to white. It's very difficult to find textiles now that go to white. So I took advantage of this piece that I had laying around, and I'm really pleased. And this is an effect that's very hard to get now because of the cloth that's available. This piece was done with a piece of household styrofoam that you use in the installation. And I took a wood burning set and I cut out the shapes that I wanted, similar to doing a woodcut. After I had the pieces finished, there's 3 different sections here of the styrofoam. I took thiox and used a paintbrush, put the thiox on the styrofoam, laid the cloth on top, and then pulled it off as a print. Then as the only color again in the piece, it's all done with poly neon thread, and that's the way I get my color into the piece. Hopefully this might have sparked some interest on your part. This is just another tool to add to your arsenal. You may not use it right away. It may come to be the perfect technique that you want to use later on in your artistic career. Thank you.